Hello campers, it's time for story time again, and today we will be reading a book called The Nutty Nut Chase. The Nutty Nut Chase. Hickory was making rude faces at Pecan when the strangest thing happened. Plop! A shiny brown nut suddenly burst up from the ground. It wobbled and shook and wibbled and quivered, then laid there. Teasingly delicious. Let's see what this brown thing is popping up out of the ground that's wiggling and wobbling. Wow, lunch, Pecan shouted. Wow, lunch and dinner, Hickory screeched. It's my nut, said Pecan. It's mine. Snap, Hickory. Uh-oh, this nut is popping out of the ground and they're both fussing over it. Let's see what it really is. It may not even be a nut. Who's making all that noise? Shouted Badger. I'm trying to sleep. All the animals came out to see what was happening. Oh, all that commotion going on. Let's see what they're fussing about. My nut, Pecan shouted. It's mine, yelled Hickory. I saw it first. Did not. Did so. Bop. His nose, shouted Little Rabbit. Certainly not. Bopping noses doesn't solve problems, said Badger. So they are really going at it, fussing over the nut. There will be a competition, and the winner will get the nut. So Badger challenged them into a competition. Let's see what kind of competition it's going to be. I know, said Head Hodge. The prickiest wins the nut. But you're the prickiest, said Pecan and Hickory. So I am, said Head Hodge, delighted. I win. I get the nut. Cuddliest get the nut, said Littlest Rabbit. I win. Enough, said Badger. We will have a race. First to reach the post wins. Hooray! A race! Everyone cheered. So everyone was trying to claim that nut. Even the rabbit and Hickory. But the Badger said enough. They're going to have a race. Blackbird whistled and the race started. Off they went. Pecan and Hickory shouted ahead, but the rabbits were close behind. Hedgehog tried to run, but only managed to waddle. In a huff, he curled himself into a ball and rode full speed down the slope. Littlest Rabbit looked back to see a hickory ball spinning towards them. Look out, he called, but it was too late. Let's see what's going to happen. So the hedgehog tried to be slick and rolled himself up into a ball. Hedgehog crashed through the races like a cannonball, and everyone landed in a prickly heap. "Oh dear," tutted Badger. "We'll have to start over again." And prickly cannonballs aren't allowed. So guess what? Hedgehog is not allowed to roll himself up into a ball. He was trying to cheat and roll down the hill instead of run down the hill. So cheaters don't get anywhere. Hedgehog snorted and sulked off. He was upset. Look at him. Since he couldn't roll himself into a ball, he got upset. Blackbird whistled, and they were off again. Pecan and Hickory were neck and neck. "My nut!" shouted Pecan triumphantly. "I win!" "No!" shouted Hickory. "It's mine! I win!" Suddenly, the nut began to move. It twitched and it jerked, joggled and jiggled until plop, it disappeared down under the ground. "It's a magic nut!" shouted Littlest Rabbit. "Nutty magic!" squealed Hedgehog, racing back to see. But it would have tested magic too, said Shrew. So that nut disappeared, so it's not really a nut. It's something else because it's moving. Let's read on to try and see what this thing is that looks like a nut, but it keeps moving. Pop! The nut sprang up right in front of Shrew. "Quick, grab it!" shouted Littlest Rabbit. All the animals shot across the grass, rolling and shrieking, jumping and hopping, banging and bopping into each other. "I've got it!" shouted Hedgehog, but the nut vanished again. "That's my nose!" Shrew squawked. They just running and bumping into each other, trying to grab that nut, or something that they thought was a nut. Let's read on to see what it is. "Shh," said Badger suddenly. "Look." He pointed at the magic nut that had appeared at his feet. Everybody tiptoed up to it. The nut shook and quivered. The animals looked in amazement. "Help!" squealed the nut. "Ah!" shrieked the Littlest Rabbit. "A talking nut!" "You're a talking nut!" said Pecan. Oh my goodness, let's see if it's really a nut that's talking, because we know that nuts can't talk. Pecan and Hickory bent down and pulled and tugged, yanked and wrenched at the nutshell with all their might. Pop! Out flew the nutshell, sending Pecan and Hickory rolling backwards. And there, where the nut had been, was a mole. So once they pulled the nut out of the ground, guess what was under that nut? A mole. Mole shook himself and stood up on his two tiny legs. "Thanks," he said. "I thought I would be stuck in that nutshell forever." Littlest Rabbit put the empty shell on his head. "It made a great hat," he giggled. "It looked like the tallest nut ever," groaned Pecan and Hickory. There's plenty more where that came from, chirped Mole, and he disappeared under the ground. So all that fuss over something they thought was a nut, it was only a nutshell that Mole had got stuck into. Let's read on. Suddenly, shiny nuts began popping up all over the place. There's enough for everyone, Mole chuckled. Pop, pop, pop! Magic! Shouted Hickory. Magic! Shouted Pecan. Nutty magic! Everyone shouted, and all they munched with delight. So Mole went back under the ground where he had buried all those nuts, and he just started throwing them up, and they went pop, pop, pop everywhere. And everyone was so delighted that Mole had given them nuts. So that's why it was called the Nutty Nut Chase. They thought what was a nut was a mole stuck in the nut, and he had plenty more nuts stuck. So that's the end of story time today, boys and girls. And remember to always believe in yourself.